Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerba. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome back. Maybe I should make that my intro music from now on. Let's see how many dislikes I get on this podcast or video. If you're on YouTube, you can dislike it. Okay, so we were talking last time about Blessed John Duns Scotus and a few of the Franciscan School of Theology. I was talking about where you can find a lot of his work. So I think I covered that subject sufficiently, at least for now. It's kind of a niche topic, and I know a lot of people like it when I talk about more general things. So I haven't heard from many of you yet, but I do enjoy finding out what you guys want to hear about. So please, you can find my contact information on our website, catholicisminthecar.com. You can also you can message me on Facebook through our Facebook page. You can message me through Twitter, I think, if you comment on one of the posts. I'm sure there's various other ways you can contact me as well. We have a pod page that if you click on the podcast episodes link on our website, it'll bring you to that page, and you can fill out a form to contact me through that. Probably the easiest way, though, is to go to our contact page of our website, catholicisminthecar.com. So let me know what you guys would like to hear about, because, I have like a giant list of stuff to talk about, but if this isn't what my listeners are wanting to hear, I would be very happy to accommodate you guys on subjects that you would like to be discussed or like me to comment on. Now, I won't probably do things that are more political. I don't have a lot of interest in doing that. There are certain important things that I think should be talked about, like the episodes I did on Nancy Pelosi and excommunication and, her being banned from the Eucharist. Also, I did one on Roe versus Wade a while back. That I think those are important topics to discuss, but I don't want to get into the politics of stuff. I also don't really want to get into church politics very much. I'll talk about it, but I don't want this to become a church gossip podcast. That's not helpful for anybody, and I think it leads to more people leaving the church than anything else. So, anyway, it's good to talk about tough things that are going on in the church, but you can talk about it too much to the point where it obviously can become scandalous, especially if things are not well founded. So I like to tread lightly in those areas. Anyway, but yeah, let me know what you guys think, subjects you're wondering about. I'd be happy to talk really about anything in relation to theology or philosophy, even a little bit of history. I can hit up my buddy Darrick Taylor at Controversies in Church History, the podcast and YouTube channel. Ask him. I can maybe ask him questions. He doesn't have a lot of time, but yeah, if you guys want to hear a really in-depth stuff about history, any in-depth topics about history, feel free to contact him. Darrick Taylor with the Controversies in Church History podcast and YouTube channel. I'm sure you can find his contact info online. They have a website as well, but he has his PhD in history. He's a historian. So if you have any questions about church history for him, I would just suggest that you go over there. I can answer basic questions. I have a pretty basic outline of church history and of history in general, but I am no expert. I'm no expert in any of these things that I talk about. And I want to make that clear. And this actually is because from a suggestion by Dr. Darrick Taylor, I was asking him, like, hey, like, I'm doing this podcast. I don't know if you listened at all. What do you think? Should I add anything? What do you think I should do? And he was like, well, just make sure that people know that you're not an expert on this stuff. Make sure people know that you're an amateur. You love it. You read a lot, but you're not an expert. So I'm going to start doing that here more frequently. I don't know if I'll put it in every podcast just because it might get a little redundant, and that's a lot to say, a lot to explain in every podcast. I explained it in my initial one, my very first one in the introduction. But anyway, so yet again, I am not an expert on these things. I'm just somebody who loves them. I'm an enthusiast. I read a lot, and I love the faith. I love the Catholic faith. So, okay. So what's the next thing we're going to turn to here? I want to discuss the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. Because I think a lot of people get confused about these. And I get confused about these, to be honest. Because in a lot of ways, there aren't strict definitions for these things. Except for, love, I think, is much more clearly defined in theology than are both faith and hope. And I want to kind of discuss the various definitions that have floated around to my knowledge, and which ones I think are most helpful, which ones I think maybe are less helpful. So, and we'll do them in order. We'll do faith, hope, and then love. But first, I just want to say, the love one won't be terribly informative, I would imagine. I'll probably just expound on the definition of love, which I think virtually everybody agrees is love is not a feeling, right? It's an act of the will where you're willing the good of another. You're willing the good of another, okay? That's like the basic definition of love in Catholic philosophy and theology. Now, faith and hope are much more difficult to get a clear definition on, I think. The word faith is used particularly faith, is used in a variety of contexts. In Scripture itself, it's used in multiple contexts. St. Paul uses it in a variety of ways, and then other scriptural writers use it in different ways. So there's various ways that people use the word, and I would say there's at least a couple definitions of it that are prominent. And the first, which is most prominent, at least in the modern day, is believing in something that you cannot see or that you cannot verify in any way. So in that definition of faith, things that are purely revelation would be acts of faith. Although, even within that definition, there's gradients, right? Because you can have something that's like a pure act of faith where maybe you have no reason to believe something whatsoever, but yet you do anyway. That would be like an extreme form of faith. And I can't think of any doctrine within Catholic theology that would be presented in that sort of a way. I don't think you should have blind faith, I guess is what I'm saying. There's no reason for blind faith. I think blind faith is actually not a virtue. I think I'm safe in arguing that it's not a virtue. Because everything that we believe, either through revelation or through natural reason, philosophy, we have reasons to believe it that aren't just because somebody said so, they're not just reasons of blind faith. And I think that's an important thing to consider, because a lot of people assume that, and this is just an erroneous assumption that people have, that faith is this blind faith, and that can be very problematic. Whereas I would argue a much better definition of faith is kind of like an educated guess almost. Like, okay, reason, history, all these sorts of things are leading me towards this conclusion, but it's not conclusive, if you know what I mean. Let's say, let's take an obvious one, the papacy, for example. I think there is very good historical evidence for the papacy, but there are a lot of people that dispute that evidence and make very good arguments about it. I think Dr. Gavin Ortland at the channel Truth Unites, he makes some very good arguments against the papacy. And there are a lot of Eastern Orthodox in particular that make very good arguments against the papacy, although not usually, the Orthodox don't usually argue against the papacy whole, because generally, to my knowledge, they would agree that the Pope of Rome, the Bishop of Rome, has the pride of place. He's first. A lot of them will say first among equals, right? So they'll at least acknowledge that he has some sort of authority. But whether he has jurisdictional and universal authority is what a lot of them will dispute. Whereas a lot of Protestants don't even go that far. They'll say, well, no, the Pope is just completely unfounded in a lot of ways, or you don't see it before the 4th century, which I think those facts can be a little bit disputed. I'm not a historian, so I don't claim to know all those historical arguments. I haven't done a super deep dive into them. I know them generally, but I haven't done a super deep dive in. But anyway, that's something where I think you can see all the arguments, like the historical arguments, see the scriptural arguments with Matthew 16 and so many others, the stuff from Isaiah, the typological arguments for the papacy from Isaiah, with Eliakim being the what was it, like the prime minister basically for the king of Israel, and there being this typological thing there when Eliakim is given the keys to the kingdom, and then Peter is also given it, right? So there's this typological difference connection that you can see between the Old Testament and the New Testament, which is, I think, actually a fairly good facet of those arguments. And then I think one of the best arguments for the papacy is just the argument from institutional chaos, that without somebody at the helm, without somebody at the head of any organization, the organization usually devolves into chaos and splintering. There's no sort of universal agreement, when definitely I think there should be in a Christian church. In the true Christian church, whichever one that is, I obviously believe it's the Catholic Church, there should be universal agreement on. And I think there's no way of institutionally having any sort of a universal agreement on things without someone at the head, someone to be the final arbiter of dispute. And of course, Jesus Christ is the true head of the church. The Holy Trinity is the true head of the church. But institutionally, the church, just like Christ, is an incarnate reality. It's made known to us. And so we need institutional realities that make it up. And so I think it would only be prudent of Christ to set up a church with someone at the head. And I think in a lot of ways, many of the revolutions that have taken place, the Protestant Revolution, and also, the schisms with the Eastern Orthodox, and then earlier with the Oriental Orthodox, I think a lot of that is due to disagreements about doctrine that turned into disagreements about headship. Because if you don't like what somebody's teaching, you can just say, well, I don't like them, right? Or I don't like their office, or whatever you might say. This is a super overly simplistic view of this issue of the papacy, mind you. I'm not trying to make this as any sort of public argument for the papacy here, but I think that's just a really good thing to consider. But all that said, all those things, the historical, the typological, scriptural arguments, and then just the argument from institutional stability, I would say, is kind of how I would put it. I think those lead us towards the papacy. But there's nothing absolutely clear in scripture or in the historical documents that we have that say super early on that, yes, the successor of Peter is to be the universal bishop of the entire church. The See of Rome is to be the seat of universal jurisdiction, and he's supposed to have not just first among equals, but first in jurisdiction, basically. And I don't think you're not going to find something that clear. And so on the papacy, for example, that's where, even if you study everything really deep in depth, you can still, you're not going to find absolutely conclusive evidence of this stuff. And so that's where faith comes in. I think that's what faith is. Okay, I have all of these things that I think lead me towards evidence of this certain conclusion, but it's not absolutely conclusive. And so therefore I have to take that little leap of faith. Sometimes it can be a larger faith, right, in order to span that gap, right? And that is what a true definition of faith is, I think, particularly in Catholic theology. The other definition of faith, of believing what's not there, or blind faith, is very faulty, and I wouldn't consider that a virtue. So, but this other type of faith is sort of where you take a leap at the end after gathering all the evidence. That is what I would definitely consider that being a virtue. So, all right, let's next time we will talk about the virtue of hope, how it's distinguished from faith, because a lot of times faith and hope get mixed up. People use them synonymously or equivocally. So, yeah, all right, we will do that next time. Thanks. Oh, real quick, please feel free to subscribe to any of my podcasts on any of the podcast players. Find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. Like me on Facebook, like the Catholicism Car channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there. Catholicism Car. And then I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support what I do at this podcast and this YouTube channel. And you can also support us on Anchor.fm. There's a support button there you click on. I also have links to all this on my website's support page at www.catholicisminthecar.com.